Well, there's some stones out here that really didn't get the message. And these stones take off and wander around the surface of this playa. They don't sit still.
In the heart of Death Valley, a 700-pound boulder slides across the desert floor in total freezing silence. For a century, the Racetrack Playa's sailing stones were a ghost story whispered by geologists. Now, high-resolution AI scans have finally peer-reviewed the void, mapping every microscopic shiver of the mud. The data reveals something more unsettling than a simple weather quirk. We aren't just looking at rocks. We are watching a massive, invisible machine at work, ticking in perfect, terrifying synchronization. The Racetrack Playa, a geography of the impossible. Let's try to stand at least mentally in the middle of the Racetrack Playa and figure out why the AI data is unsettling. This is not just a desert, it is a geological scar. Located in a remote, high-altitude basin in Death Valley National Park, the playa is a 3-mile-long stretch of mud so flat that the altitude varies by less than a couple of inches from one end to the other. It is a place defined by absolute stillness. There are no plants, no scurrying animals, and no cell service. It is a vacuum of biological noise. Yet, littered across this sun-baked floor are hundreds of dolomite and syenite boulders, some weighing as much as a grand piano, trailing long, deep furrows in the earth behind them. The mystery of the sailing stones was born the moment the first surveyors realized the tracks weren't circular. These weren't rocks caught in a whirlwind or tumbling down from the surrounding mountains. The tracks were straight, jagged, and sometimes hundreds of feet long. Some even featured sharp 90-degree turns, as if the rock had suddenly decided to change its destination. For the better part of a century, the racetrack was a playground for fringe theories. Early observers suggested magnetic anomalies or localized gravity warps. Others, unable to find footprints around the stones, whispered about poltergeist activity or extraterrestrial interference. Even the more grounded geologists were baffled.
Aliens, magnetism, tilting playas, vibrations on the playa.
They calculated that to move a 700-pound rock across that specific friction-heavy mud, you would need sustained winds exceeding 150 miles per hour, hurricane forces that simply do not happen at the bottom of a desert basin. The physical isolation of the playa added a layer of psychological dread to the mystery. It is a place where the human brain struggles to maintain a sense of scale. Without trees or buildings, your depth perception fails. You see a rock in the distance and cannot tell if it is a pebble 10 feet away or a monolith half a mile off. This disorientation is the playa's natural state. It feels like a glitch in reality, a level of a simulation where the physics engine hasn't quite loaded correctly. For decades, researchers tried to catch the stones in the act. They set up stakes. They used time-lapse cameras that failed in the heat, and they tagged rocks with GPS units. But the desert is patient. The rocks move only once every few years, usually in the dead of winter, during the coldest, most inhospitable nights when no human is brave or foolish enough to be standing in the freezing muck.
Thin little layer of ice. Big winds come in and they push these stones and allow them to just sail across the desert floor.
This created a quantum problem. The stones only seemed to move when we weren't looking. This lack of direct observation allowed the legend of the Rolling Stones to grow into a modern myth. It wasn't just about the movement. It was about the impossible nature of the tracks. How could a heavy object move across a flat surface without a visible engine? Why did some tracks stop abruptly while others looped back on themselves? The playa became a symbol of the unexplained, a site where the earth seemed to be performing a secret ritual. It remained a cold case for generations, a silent taunt to our scientific vanity. We could map the stars and split the atom, but we couldn't explain why a rock in California was taking a walk. We needed a new way to see, a way to observe the desert without the limitations of human patience or biological eyes. For a century, we lacked the eyes to see the pattern. until we gave those eyes to an algorithm. How AI scanned the void. The breakthrough didn't come from a lone scientist with a telescope or a lucky hiker with a camera, but from a cloud-based algorithm hungry for data. To solve a mystery this ancient, researchers realized they had to stop looking at the rocks as individual objects and start looking at the entire playa as a single, living data set. This shifted the investigation from traditional geology into the realm of high-fidelity digital surveillance, turning the Racetrack Playa into the world's largest outdoor laboratory. By deploying swarms of drones equipped with LiDAR and specialized sensors, teams captured tens of thousands of overlapping, high-resolution images of the racetrack. These weren't just snapshots.
To launch a drone mounted with a high-definition camera, she wants to identify.
They were the raw fuel for an AI-driven process known as photogrammetry. The goal was to build a digital twin of the desert, a virtual replica so precise that an algorithm could detect a change in elevation the width of a human hair. When the AI began processing this mountain of visual information, the results were immediate and jarring. Humans tend to see the desert as a static, dead thing, but the AI saw a fever dream of constant, microscopic motion. It revealed that the playa floor is never truly still. The algorithm tracked micro-shivers in the dried mud, showing that the entire basin breathes with the expansion and contraction of thermal cycles. More importantly, the AI began to map the force vectors hidden in the trails. By analyzing the depth and displacement of the mud in the furrows, the machine could calculate the exact amount of pressure required to move each stone at any given second. It was like performing an autopsy on a ghost. The AI wasn't just looking at where the rocks were, it was reconstructing the invisible hand that pushed them with cold, mathematical certainty. What the AI found was a terrifying level of mechanical efficiency. The data showed that the stones don't just slide in a clumsy, haphazard way. Instead, they move with a low-friction grace that defies the known grit of the desert floor. The algorithm flagged anomalies in the mud that the human eye had dismissed as mere texture for a century. It identified shear zones, areas where the surface tension of the ground had been temporarily manipulated by an outside force to become as slick as a greased bearing. The AI began to predict the movement of stones that hadn't even moved yet, identifying the sweet spots on the playa where the geography allowed for maximum kinetic energy. It turned the racetrack into a giant mathematical grid, revealing that the movement of the stones was the result of a perfectly tuned environmental engine that triggers only under a specific, rare set of binary conditions. The scale of the data processing was unprecedented. To build the digital twin, the AI had to reconcile billions of data points.
Focus and stigmate at twice the magnification I want to take the image at. I will come back to half the magnification and take the image.
Accounting for the curvature of the Earth and the minute warping of the drone lenses. As the machine stitched the desert together, it began to notice patterns that were invisible from the ground. It saw that the tracks weren't just random paths. They were organized into corridors of movement. The AI could see where the wind channeled through the surrounding mountains, creating invisible rivers of pressure. This wasn't just weather. It was a sophisticated interplay of fluid dynamics and solid-state physics. The algorithm revealed that the playa behaves more like a fluid than a solid when the conditions are right, a realization that makes the solid ground beneath your feet feel fundamentally untrustworthy. Perhaps the most unsettling part of the AI scan was the realization of how much we had missed by being biological observers. Our eyes are tuned to see things that move at our human pace, but the AI operates on a timeline of nanoseconds and decades simultaneously. It showed that some stones had been vibrating in place for weeks before a single inch of forward progress was made, a rhythmic pulsing that suggests the stones are being primed by the environment. It revealed that the tracks themselves are far more complex than a simple drag mark. They contain micro-pulses that suggest the rocks are being pulsed forward rather than pulled. This level of granular detail transformed the racetrack from a mystery into a monitored system. We are no longer guessing at the why. We are watching the how through the cold, unblinking lens of a processor that doesn't feel the desert heat or the midnight chill. Furthermore, the AI's ability to see into the past through the geometry of the tracks provided a window into centuries of movement. By analyzing the erosion levels within the furrows, the algorithm could estimate when a rock moved 50 years ago versus 5 years ago. This created a time-lapse map of the desert's history, showing a frantic, erratic dance that has been happening in total isolation for millennia. The sheer volume of movement detected by the AI was staggering. Far more rocks move far more often than we ever suspected. It paints a picture of a desert that is constantly in motion the moment our backs are turned. It is a world that functions perfectly well without us, governed by an algorithm of wind, ice, and mud that the AI is only now beginning to translate into a language we can understand. The data didn't just show movement, it showed a terrifying level of coordination. The hive mind of the stones. When the AI began to overlay the historical GPS coordinates with its new high-resolution 3D maps, the most unsettling pattern emerged. It wasn't the speed of the stones or the weight they carried, it was their collective behavior.
What happens to get these stones to be able to move is a series of very rare events come together.
In the human mind, a rock is the ultimate individual. It is a static, heavy object that stays where it is placed unless a specific force acts upon it. But the AI data told a different story. It showed that the stones on the Racetrack Playa do not act as individuals, they act as a herd. The mapping software revealed that hundreds of stones, separated by several miles of cracked mud, often move in perfectly parallel tracks. If one stone veers 3 degrees to the left, another stone a mile away does the same at the exact same moment. This level of synchronization is what geologists have begun to call the hive mind of the desert. To the naked eye, a 700-pound boulder turning a sharp corner on a flat, dry lake bed looks like a miracle or a haunting. To the AI, it looks like a coordinated mechanical event. The algorithm tracked these synchronized turns with terrifying precision, showing that the stones aren't just drifting, they are locked into a singular invisible grid. Imagine standing on the playa in the dark and seeing 1,000 boulders, ranging from the size of a toaster to the weight of a small car, all suddenly pivot in unison, as if responding to a silent command. The data confirms that this isn't a theory, it is a recorded reality. The AI's spatio-temporal analysis showed that these movements happen in bursts. A stone might sit motionless for 3 years, and then, in a single window of 6 minutes, it will travel 200 feet. During those 6 minutes, every other stone in that specific corridor of the playa is also traveling 200 feet. The resulting map looks less like a natural occurrence and more like a massive automated assembly line. The AI highlighted that the tracks are so uniform that they appear to have been drafted by a giant's compass. There is no wobbling, no hesitation, and no variation in depth. It is a level of mathematical perfection that feels inherently artificial, as if the desert floor has been programmed with a set of instructions that the rocks are simply following. This coordination suggests a scale of force that is difficult for the human brain to process. We are used to things moving because we push them or because gravity pulls them down a slope, but the playa is flat. The AI's force mapping showed that when the stones move, the entire 3-mile basin is effectively turned on. The algorithm identified wave fronts of energy moving across the mud, dragging everything in their path with a cold, relentless indifference. The terror in this data is the realization that the ground beneath your feet can suddenly become a conveyor belt, and if you were standing there, you would be just another object on the line, moved by a force that doesn't care about your weight, your strength, or your presence. As the AI dug deeper into the turning points of the stones, it found that the rocks sometimes perform complex maneuvers. Some stones spin in place, carving deep circular grooves before continuing on their path. Others seem to leapfrog one another, with one stone stopping exactly where another began. The AI was able to simulate these movements, creating a digital ballet of heavy dolomite. When you watch the AI's reconstruction, the rocks don't look like rocks anymore. They look like a fleet of ships or a swarm of insects. They move with a grace that is totally at odds with their jagged, ancient forms. The AI reveals that the racetrack is not a graveyard of stones, but a theater of motion that only performs for an empty house. The machine learning model also identified what it calls ghost clusters. These are areas where the AI detected the exact same track patterns, synchronized turns, stops, and starts, but there was no rock at the end of the trail. These empty tracks are even more unsettling than the ones with boulders. They suggest that the force moving the stones is so powerful and so consistent that it creates the same footprints, whether it is carrying a 700-pound load or nothing at all. It proves that the rocks are merely passengers. They are the visible evidence of a massive, invisible machine that is constantly grinding across the desert floor. The AI has peeled back the curtain, showing us the gears of the world. And the gears are larger and more precise than we ever imagined. By analyzing the vibration data, the AI even suggested that the stones communicate through the ground. As one stone moves, it sends a seismic pulse through the wet mud that the AI could track as a wave. These pulses might actually help trigger the movement of stones further down the line, creating a chain reaction of sliding rock. This feedback loop means the stones are physically linked by the very earth they sit on. They are part of a giant, vibrating circuit. The data doesn't just show a mystery being solved. It shows a landscape that is far more alive and interconnected than we are comfortable believing. The dead desert is, in fact, a buzzing, shifting, synchronized engine of stone. This isn't just a geological quirk. It is a blueprint for survival on a dead world. The window pane. Ice. A razor-thin engine. To solve the mystery of how a herd of boulders can move in such terrifying unison, the AI had to look past the stones and focus on the air and the water. The data eventually pointed to a culprit so delicate it sounds like a fairy tale, yet so powerful it acts like a continental shelf. The secret is window pane ice. Through climate modeling and sensor fusion, the AI reconstructed the exact atmospheric conditions required for a move. It begins with a rare desert rain that turns the playa into a shallow, slick pond.
The more likely ones were wind combined with rain, and some people were suggesting ice.
When the temperature drops below freezing at night, a sheet of ice forms over the water. But this isn't the thick, solid ice of a skating rink. It is a sheet as thin as a pane of glass, barely 3 to 6 millimeters thick. The AI's fluid dynamics simulations showed that when the sun rises, the heat begins to crack this massive, miles-wide sheet of ice into floating rafts. If a light breeze, even just 10 miles per hour, catches these rafts, the physics changes instantly. Because the ice sheet is so vast, it acts like a giant sail. Even a weak wind provides a massive amount of total force because it is pushing against thousands of square feet of ice. If a 700-pound rock is frozen into one of these rafts, it is no longer a boulder sitting on mud. It is a passenger on a titanic, slow-moving ship. The ice doesn't just push the rock, it carries it, slicing through the shallow water and dragging the stone's base through the soft mud below like a plow. This explains the hive mind effect that the AI mapping uncovered. When a mile-wide sheet of ice begins to drift, every stone frozen into that sheet moves at the exact same speed, in the exact same direction, and stops at the exact same moment the ice hits an obstruction or the wind dies down. The AI's 3D reconstructions of past moves showed these sheets as ghostly geometric overlays, showing exactly where the ice fractured and where it held firm. It reveals a terrifying disparity in power. A sheet of ice so thin you could break it with a finger is capable of dragging a monolith that would crush a human being. It is a reminder that in the natural world, fragile does not mean weak. The AI also detected the sound of this process through seismic sensors placed in the mud. The movement of the windowpane ice creates a low-frequency hum, punctuated by the tinkling sound of breaking glass as the sheets collide. Imagine being alone on the playa in the freezing dawn, hearing the desert literally shatter around you as hundreds of stones begin their silent, synchronized crawl. The AI's acoustic analysis suggests that the sound would be rhythmic, almost like a massive, slow-beating heart. This isn't the chaotic roar of a landslide. It is a cold, calculated, and crystalline process. The engine of the racetrack is made of frozen water and light air, a mechanical system that disappears the moment the sun gets too high. Furthermore, the AI revealed that the window pane ice creates its own microclimate on the playa. As the ice moves, it displaces water, creating pressure ridges that further lubricate the mud. The algorithm showed that the ice actually prepares the track for the rock, clearing away debris and smoothing the silt. This is why the tracks look so unnaturally perfect. The AI's digital twin of the move shows the ice acting with the precision of a master craftsman, carving the earth with a 700-pound tool. The terror lies in the invisibility of the force. By the time a human hiker reaches the playa at noon, the ice has melted into the mud, leaving only the heavy stone and the deep, impossible track. Without the AI's ability to process thousands of variables simultaneously, we might still be looking for magnetic hills. The machine saw through the illusion by calculating the friction coefficient of the mud under different ice melt scenarios. It proved that the racetrack is a high-performance machine that requires a perfect, razor-thin tolerances to function. If the ice is too thick, it won't move. If it's too thin, it shatters without moving the stone. The AI mapped the Goldilocks zone of the desert, a terrifyingly narrow window of time and temperature where the laws of physics allow for the impossible. Ultimately, the windowpane ice is the invisible hand of the desert. The AI has shown us that the stones are not moving themselves. They are being moved by a planetary mechanism that is as beautiful as it is cold. The data paints a picture of a world where the most solid objects, mountains of stone, are at the mercy of the most transient objects, thin sheets of ice. It is a hierarchy of power that feels upside down. We are used to the heavy and the permanent being in control, but on the racetrack, the temporary and the fragile are the masters of the landscape. If the desert can move mountains with a sheet of ice, what else is it capable of when we aren't looking? NASA connection. The implications of the AI's findings on the Racetrack Playa extend far beyond the borders of Death Valley. In fact, some of the most sophisticated algorithms used to scan these stones weren't designed by geologists, but by planetary scientists at NASA. To an astrophysicist, the playa isn't just a desert. It's a high-fidelity laboratory for understanding the surface of Mars. The terrifying result of the AI scan is the realization that the movement of the stones is a preview of a cosmic reality. If 700-pound boulders can migrate across a dry lake bed on Earth using nothing but a whisper of wind and a skin of ice, then the dead planets we are currently exploring might be far more active than we ever dared to imagine. NASA uses the AI data from Death Valley to train the vision of its Mars rovers. On the Red Planet, there are vast plains of desiccated mud and ancient lake beds that look identical to the racetrack. For years, orbital satellites have captured images of strange linear tracks on the Martian surface, tracks that look hauntedly similar to the furrows left by the sailing stones. By feeding the Death Valley AI scans into the rover's navigational software, scientists are teaching machines to recognize active geology. The AI revealed that a landscape doesn't need a biological heartbeat to be in motion. It only needs a specific, cold chemistry. This shifts our understanding of life on other worlds. A planet might be geologically alive and capable of complex, synchronized movement, even if it hasn't seen a drop of liquid water in a billion years. The AI mapping of the window pane ice has been particularly illuminating for the study of the Martian poles and the carbon dioxide dry ice that sublimates there.
The next morning, almost every day out here is clear, the sun comes out and it starts to thaw the ice.
The algorithm's ability to calculate low-friction migration allows NASA to predict how rocks might move on Mars during the seasonal shifts. There is a deep existential dread in watching an AI simulation of a Martian landscape, where massive boulders are silently sailing across the dust in the middle of a carbon dioxide storm. It reinforces the idea of the indifferent universe, a reality where the laws of physics are performing grand, elaborate ballets across the galaxy, and they don't require a single human eye to witness them. We are mapping the movements of a dead world, and the results suggest that we are the anomaly, not the stones. The AI has also highlighted the terrifying precision of these planetary machines. In a simulated Martian environment, the AI showed that the same hive mind effect seen in Death Valley would be amplified by the lower gravity. On Mars, stones the size of houses could theoretically sail for miles under the right atmospheric pressure. The AI data from the racetrack acts as a Rosetta Stone, allowing us to translate the silent languages of other planets. It tells us that the universe is not a static museum. It is a grinding, shifting mechanism. When we look at the AI's reconstruction of the sailing stones, we aren't just looking at California history. We are looking at a universal blueprint for how matter behaves when it is left alone in the dark. This connection to the cosmos strips away the local mystery of the stones and replaces it with a cold, planetary scale. The AI proves that the racetrack is an Earth-based outpost of a galactic phenomenon. It suggests that across the solar system, on moons like Enceladus or the frozen plains of Pluto, there are sailing stones of different materials, ammonia ice, methane slush, or crystalline dust, all performing the same synchronized turns and stops. The AI has revealed that the ghostly behavior of the rocks is simply the standard operating procedure of a cold universe. We finally have the data, but it only proves how little we matter to the landscape. The vanishing tracks. As the AI completed its most comprehensive mapping of the Racetrack Playa, it uncovered a secondary, more haunting data set: a countdown. By cross-referencing decades of satellite imagery with real-time sensor data, the algorithm began to track the frequency of the perfect storms required to move the stones. The results are a digital eulogy. The very window pane ice that acts as the stone's engine is becoming a relic of the past. As the Mojave Desert warms, the specific trifecta of heavy winter rain followed by deep sub-freezing nights is happening less frequently. The AI's predictive modeling suggests that within a few decades, the sailing will stop entirely. The rocks will be frozen in time, not by ice, but by the heat of a changing world. There is a unique terror in witnessing a mystery being solved at the exact moment it begins to go extinct. The AI has given us the eyes to see the invisible machine, but it has also shown us that the machine is running out of fuel. The algorithm identified dead zones on the playa where the mud has become too desiccated to ever support a slickened side again. In these areas, the stones sit at the end of their tracks like abandoned monuments. The AI's heat maps show the encroaching warmth as a red tide, slowly suffocating the cold, fragile cycles that allow the stones to migrate. We are the last generation of humans who will ever see a fresh track carved into the racetrack's surface. This is when it gets scary. The AI tracked a 25% decrease in potential move nights over the last 20 years alone. This isn't a slow geological shift. It is a rapid environmental shuttering. The algorithm revealed that the stones are already moving less frequently and for shorter distances than they did in the 40s. The hive mind is losing its connection as the ice sheets fracture too early or fail to form at all. Soon, the only evidence of this planetary ballet will be the digital twin living in a server, a ghost of a ghost. The AI has effectively captured the last gasps of a phenomenon that has likely existed for 10,000 years. This adds a layer of temporal horror to the data. We spent a century being baffled by the stones, only to have a machine explain them just as they are about to become permanent fixtures of the landscape. The tracks will eventually erode, the wind will smooth the mud, and the boulders will simply be boulders again. The AI's data is a record of a vanishing act, proving that even the most solid mysteries are subject to the transience of the climate. The racetrack is becoming a graveyard of movement, a place where the physics of the past is being overwritten by the heat of the future. What do you think of this video? Leave your comments in the section below and make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't. Thanks for watching.